All right, appreciate everyone for joining us for Coach Franklin's weekly press conference. We'll start with an opening statement from Coach, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Like always, appreciate you guys being here, covering Penn State football, Looking forward to getting back in Beaver Stadium after a week off. This time of year is kind of unusual for this early in the season to not be playing. We're able to get out and get a ton of recruiting done. We're able to take care of our guys from a rest and recovery standpoint, and we're able to get some, depth guys some work, some guys that are a little bit further down the depth chart, which was good, and then obviously being on the road recruiting. So, got Penn State this week, and Kenny Burns coming to town. Obviously, Kenny's very familiar, not only with Penn State from what he studied us this year during his time at Kent State, but obviously also from his time at Minnesota with P.J. Fleck. Tremendous opportunity for both programs. We're excited about having them. Obviously, they've had some challenges early in this year, but we've seen some good things on tape that we need to be prepared for and we need to be ready for. When you talk about, their offense, Mark Carney is their offensive coordinator. They're a RPO tempo offense trying to base out of the spread, mainly out of 11 personnel. We'll mix some 12 personnel in as well. Guys that we've been impressed with is their running back, number 3, Kai Thomas, who's a Kansas transfer, and their wide receiver, number 0, Luca Greenlight. And then also their wide receiver number 2, Krishan McCray, guys that they are trying to get the ball to in a number of different ways, and we're going to need to be prepared for that. And then defensively, Cody Morgan. He's a North Dakota State guy. A lot of his career was there, been at Kent State the last 2 years, but everybody has so much respect for the North Dakota State guys, have done a really, really good job. They're a 4-down front, which we're used to from our defense. Variations of middle of field open in cover 4 and cover 6. We'll also close the middle of field up with some cover 3 and cover 1. Again, things that we're familiar with. Pressure overall about 33%. It spikes up a little bit on third down to 37%. And then guys that we've been impressed with, their defensive end, number 6, Stephen Daly. Their linebacker, number 8, Khalib Johns. And then their linebacker, number 4, Rocco Nickel. Rocco is from Philadelphia, PA. He's from St. Joe's Prep. And then their defensive end, number 11, Cameron Olds. Cameron Olds is a big kid, 6'4", 245 pounds, from Richmond, Virginia. We've been impressed with those guys. And then on special teams, C.J. Robbins is their special teams coordinator. Again, been with them for the last couple of years, another South Dakota guy. From a special teams perspective, this is probably their strength. If you look at them statistically, their punt block return unit is ranked 7th in the country. Their kickoff return team is ranked 6th in the MAC. They're doing a nice job there, and really a lot of it deals with the receiver that I was talking about, us having respect for. Punt return, kick returner, number 0, again, Luca Greenlight. So we're excited about that challenge. They have our attention, there's no doubt about it, and kind of looking forward to getting into practice on Tuesday. We did have in a lot of ways, our Sunday practice is a bye-week Sunday practice because although we're into game week, the Sunday is not a traditional Sunday for us because we don't have corrections to make. We don't have the film to watch. So we're actually on the field longer than we normally are on a Sunday following a bye week, and we're able to get some good work done. So open up the questions.
Let's go to Rich Garcella and then Frank Bodani. You're on deck.
Good afternoon, James. How are you today?
Good, Rich. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. James, you mentioned a couple things about what you wanted to do last week, but what were some of your top priorities last week for the bye week, and where did decreasing penalties rank among those priorities?
Yeah, for me, we just literally talked about it again in the staff meeting this morning. That's a major priority for me because we're just making things more difficult than they need to be. We're either stopping drives after we convert first downs or making more challenging third down situations hard to get into a rhythm on offense, and then defensively, letting guys off the hook, in terms of penalties that extend drives or make more manageable third down situations for their offense against our defense. So just some things that we got to get cleaned up. We're giving yards away and making things more challenging. So that is a major priority for us. I think we've talked about this in the past. If you look statistically at where penalties rank in terms of winning and losing, it's nowhere near what the turnover ratio is and what explosive plays are. But it makes for a sloppy game. It makes for a game that as a head coach you're not proud to watch. And it also just makes it difficult to get into a rhythm. I think it also has impacted time of possession, which has been a problem in our first two games, specifically in the first half. So we need to get those things cleaned up. But that's probably the biggest thing. And then offensively is third down. And really the same thing for our defense, getting off the field on defense and then being able to sustain drives on offense. I want to create more touches on offense for more players and more guys. And, it's difficult to do that when you're not extending drives. So the explosiveness has been great on offense, but we need to be more efficient and specifically on third down too.
Let's go to Frank Bodani and then Mark Wogenrich. You're on deck.
Hey, good afternoon, James. Hope you're well.
You too, Frank.
Thanks. I wanted to ask about KJ Winston. I know just as regards injury-wise, is it a longer-term significant injury with him, or, what can you reveal about his status in regards to that? And then just going with the safeties end. So whenever he can play again, right now, your safety room, you have your top two guys beyond them, beyond Jalen Reed and Zaki. How is that? Who would be the next guy up safety-wise? How is that position looking right now behind them two?
Yeah, so a couple things. I think that the first point is I don't really have any new information to share with you guys at this stage. I probably will, I would think, probably post-practice, when I see you guys later in the week. And then obviously, Day Lane is the next guy that we've been trying to get reps for. Obviously, when you're talking about, Jay Reed and Zaki, those two guys played a ton of football for us and will need to continue. Day's another guy that, we've been trying to get more reps and more experience. That'll be important, but we're going to have to develop, a few more guys, especially, hopefully we'll see timing-wise how this whole thing will play out, but definitely for short term we're going to have to develop some more guys. So Day is going to be really important this week. And obviously moving forward as well, he's a guy that we've been trying to get more involved. We had planned on playing him more last week. Didn't play out that way, but he's probably the guy that I would say our focus is on the most right now.
Let's go to Mark Wogenrich and then Mike Gross. You're on deck.
Hi, James. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks. When you went back and looked at just the first half defense from Bowling Green over last week, how did you address that? What did you want to get corrected out of there? And how much of that kind of stuff did you feel might have been just an anomaly in the way that first half played out?
Well, a couple things. I think we did not tackle as well in game two as we did in game one. And obviously that's an area that we got to get that cleaned up because we need to be getting better as the season goes on. And I think there's a lot of reasons that probably factor into that. but we got to be getting better from a tackling perspective. I thought we tackled really well week one, when that's a concern for most people across the country. I think the other thing that's a big one for us that we got settled in the second half is the communication. We were trying to rely specifically on the headset communication, and at home that can be a little bit more challenging with the linebacker trying to verbally communicate to all 11 guys on the field. Very similar to what I had explained to you guys about no huddle teams on offense. Trying to get the quarterback to communicate to everybody, that was still going to be challenging unless you're huddling. And on defense, you don't typically huddle. You condense a little bit, but you don't necessarily huddle. So that created some challenges for us and allowed us some opportunities to get those things cleaned up in the second half and really moving forward. And then just the discipline of playing the defense, of not trying to do more than your job. And the more we play great team defense and do their job and be gap accountable, then the plays come to you. So we just got them settled down and got back to playing the way we're capable of playing in the second half, and we need to build on that, obviously, going into week 3.
Let's go to Mike Gross and then Johnny McGonigal. You're on deck.
Good afternoon, James. How are you?
Good. How are you, Mike?
Good, thanks. Last year we talked so much about explosive plays and last couple of years really, and the first couple of weeks that's been pretty. It seems like that piece of it has been very good, but now we're talking about third down, and you even mentioned time of possession a couple minutes ago. So I guess, how do you practice third down? Like, do you have early down package and third down package? Explain a little bit about how you try to coach getting better on third down.
Yeah, you do third down periods in practice. Typically, your third down calls and the third down defenses that you're going to see are different than normal downs. So you do third down periods. You do third down periods against your defense. You do third down periods against the D squad or the scout team that's replicating the look that you're expecting to see in the game. And when I say third down periods, it's 3rd and 4. This is what we're running on 3rd and 4. This is what we're expecting to see. Trying to defend us on 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, whatever it may be. Those things are scripted out and practiced. So very similar to how you practice normal downs, how you practice red zone, how you practice third down. You specifically practice those things, and then when there's opportunities to go against our defense, which we typically do on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, one of those days is always a 2-minute period, and then the other day we rotate back and forth between third down and red zone. And then obviously if we're not doing as well as we want to do on red zone, or not doing as well as we want to do on third down, then we may double that up, and that could be on the offensive or defensive side of the ball. But if not, we rotate back and forth. So that's getting you an extra third down period with speed. That may not be the specific looks that you're going to see in the game. And then obviously you're going to do a third down period, that's scout looks, which are specific looks that you're expecting to see in the game. So that's how you practice them, and really you break up the entire game like that into segments. And then obviously when you do scrimmages and things like that in the summer, those things also come up organically that way too.
Let's go to Johnny McGonigal and then Neil Riddell.
Hey, James, how are you?
Good, Johnny. How are you?
Good. I got a question a little unrelated to game week, but Bill O'Brien, your predecessor, doing some good things at BC early this season. What are your thoughts just on Bill, being a head coach again back in college football?
Yeah, as you guys know, I've known Bill for a long time. I've known Fitz, his strength coach, for a long time. We were all at the University of Maryland together. Me and Bill lived in the same neighborhood. His wife and my wife were good friends. Obviously I followed his career in the NFL. and now back, obviously at BC at a minute for a short period of time. He was also in our conference at Ohio State, and now back at BC, which for a lot of those guys from that part of the country, BC's like, a dream job. It's interesting. I've talked to a ton of guys like, that BC job is a very desirable job. And if you know Billy's background, it makes a ton of sense. So, when that hire happened and when that whole thing went down, I thought it was a win-win for both BC and Billy. He's got a really mobile, dynamic quarterback, that had really done some nice things last year. And when you got that piece of the puzzle, you can build from there. And Billy's got tremendous experience doing that. So it's been cool to watch it, and happy for those guys and not surprised.
Our last question on Zoom is Neil Riddell.
Hey, James.
Hey, Neil.
I'm wondering, you had mentioned early in the season how the playoffs going to lengthen the season now, and you were concerned about that, building depth and whatnot. I'm just wondering, with the changes now, do you still advocate, I know you guys have financial considerations, a 12-game regular season?
Hold on. Say this again, Neil. What are you asking me?
I'm asking if you still advocate, in the wake of the playoff now, do you still advocate a 12-game regular season because of the length of the season? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, but I don't think that's going away. I don't think that's changing. It's interesting because whenever anybody wants to get anything done in college football, we say we're doing it for health and wellness, to get things passed, rule changes and things like that. But it's hard to say that when we're talking about a regular season as you described it, plus 5 more games, possible 17-game season. Depending on how it plays out, for the teams that make the national championship. So, I don't think that's probably the right thing to do, but that's not changing for all the reasons that you could imagine. And it's just like conferences that play 9 games or 8 games. I don't think that was advantageous either, for the Big Ten. But I also would make the argument, once you go 9, you're not going to go back to 8. You're hoping other conferences will go to 9, and I could actually see it even possibly going to 10 conference games. So I don't see that changing, Neil. But I understand why you're asking it, and I think it's a fair question. Especially if you're basing everything off of student athlete health and welfare, for a ton of different reasons.
Please raise your hand and we'll take a mic to you. We'll start with Mark over here.
James, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing great. Would you consider Luca Greenlight at this point, and can you address the progress he's made since arriving on campus mid-year at 215 or 220 pounds?
Yeah, so Luke is been transitioned to a Greenlight at this stage. Again, these green, reds, and yellows can change as things go. I think we always look at things changing in terms of moving up from red to yellow to green, but they also can go in the other direction. But Luke's doing really well. He's one of these guys, he showed up on campus. He was very driven and motivated to play. That is both mentally and physically, was willing to do the things necessary to play, attack the weight room, attack summer workouts, attack the playbook. Has ability to make plays in the passing game. Where he's somewhat unusual in 2024 for a tight end is he'll also stick his nose in there. And for some of these guys that have never really done that at the high school level, that's a challenge, and especially when you're asking them to block Smith Vilbert, who's 280 pounds or whatever he may be. He's shown a willingness and aggressiveness with that as well. So I've been a real big fan of Luke's in his approach. We got a ton of guys that I think could play as true freshmen. But the guys that have played, I think, are showing that they're willing to make the type of sacrifices and commitments to actually do it. And some guys are either not physically ready to play or emotionally ready to play or mentally ready to play. And he's a guy that's shown through hard work and development that he is ready to play kind of in all three.
In the middle, John.
Hey, James, how are you?
Good, John. How are you?
Doing good. Andy Kotelnicki has talked in the past about how he will kind of take plays from anywhere to add to his offense. I'm curious, how much do you guys add to the offense in the season? Is like, obviously coming off a bye week, is there any chance that you see something, from another program that you want to add, and do you add it during the year?
Yeah, I don't think that is specific to Andy. I think everybody's doing that, whether you're watching opponent tape. There's been a ton of times where our defense is going against a team and they're doing something that is problematic and causes stress and causes issues, and you kind of steal that and add it to your game, or you see another college game that you were watching, or an NFL game, or a high school game. I think coaches are constantly trying to find things. I think where you have to be careful is that you're not just grabbing a bunch of different things, different concepts that don't necessarily fit what you do and how you're trying to run complementary plays and schemes. So I think that's where you have to be careful, because if not, you won't have a system. You'll just have a bunch of cute plays from different systems, and it needs to be something that complements what we already do. So Andy does that, but really I think every coach in America is doing that constantly. And then to your point, I think it could show up maybe a little bit more on bye weeks, but again, not necessarily, because if you're grabbing schemes that already complement what you do, there are slight tweaks, that you're adding. A lot of times it's personnel group, a lot of times it may be formation, motion shift, but something we're already kind of doing, just with a little bit different presentation.
On the right, Tyler.
Hey, James.
Hey, Tyler.
Caden Saunders is a guy that, going back to August, we heard about his potential impact offensively, special teams. The injury in preseason camp, Coach Lustig told us last week that it kind of changed the way they navigated things with Caden as a punt returner, and it seems on offense. I don't think he's played yet on offense. When you look at his room for growth and development coming off of the preseason injury, how much more do you think we can see of Caden Saunders here in his third year on campus? And what have you seen thus far that maybe has you excited? Because we haven't seen much of him yet in game action.
Yeah, we haven't either. It's the same thing. He's had a lingering injury, and not that he's not able to play, but he's not able to play at 100%. He's a guy that I think there was a ton of excitement about, and there still is. But he's had a lingering, injury that has slowed some of that progress or some of that development down.
In the front, Audrey.
Hey, James. You mentioned a couple times the helmet communication with the defense. Through 2 games, what have you guys kind of learned with regards to that, coupled with the iPads? What are maybe some of the things that you didn't expect to be challenges, or ways in which maybe it's helped you guys so far?
Well, probably the biggest thing, like I mentioned, it was going to be an obvious advantage for huddle teams, which we are. There was a distinct advantage, for our offense. Defensively, I think a lot of the challenges that we talked about, for offenses with the communication has showed up, and then really kind of finding the best ways to do it. Offensively, it's being able to literally not have to signal at all and be able to talk to the quarterback and tell him the play, and then also maybe a few little coaching points. Defensively, again, how do you get both corners the information at 53 yards away from each other, possibly up to 53 yards away from each other, and then also I think a linebacker is very comfortable in communicating to the D-line, because they've always done that, strength calls, things like that, setting the front. But now, depending on how you're using it, you're asking that linebacker to turn around and communicate to the safeties. And while he's doing that, he's not seeing the formation, he's not seeing the alignment. So it's created some challenges that we've had to work through in the first couple of weeks, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. And probably a lot of the things that we discussed that were going to be issues for offenses that try to operate from a no huddle.
Over here in the back left, Jared.
Hey, Coach Franklin, over here.
Hey, Jared.
Obviously, a talking point about the offense this season has been...
Oh, one more thing. I didn't mention the iPads. I think the iPads have been good, but I think the headset as well as the iPads, you got to have kind of structure to it, because if not, I think they can become a distraction. And I also think you can give the players too much information where you're spending the whole time in between series on the iPads and they're not involved in the game. So I think making sure that there's parameters there and how we're going to use it and how we're not going to use it, I think is important too. Sorry.
No problem. Yeah, obviously balance has been a talking point about the offense this season. When we talk about wanting to get more guys involved, how do you balance riding a hot hand like Tyler Warren right now versus getting more guys involved in the offense?
I think it goes back to what I've already addressed multiple times, is just plays. We need more plays, which goes hand in hand with third down. You convert a higher percentage of third down, then you're on the field longer, and you're probably talking about 10 to 15 more plays a half, which with more plays creates more opportunities for explosive plays, which I know you guys love, which also creates just being more efficient by converting on third down. And then obviously the other thing is just the more plays is the more opportunities for touches. I think that just kind of happens organically. We go into every single game, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, trying to get everybody involved, but you can't force the ball to go to certain guys. Depending on the defense that you're getting or the pressure you're getting or the look that's presented, is going to dictate and determine where the ball goes for that specific play. So the more plays is really, to me, the solution.
Way in the back, T. Frank.
James, good afternoon.
Hey, T. Frank.
I have a question. You mentioned earlier talking about Kent State and their defense, cover six, but just two high safeties in general, it seems is very popular in the NFL in terms of trying to take away the deep pass. I'm thinking specifically of like the Robert Saleh defenses that play a lot of quarters. In that situation of trying to take away the deep pass, how do you think you've done against those particular concepts this year and still generating those yards? And what are the challenges, I guess, in that kind of idea of still generating explosive plays against defenses that are specifically designed to take that away?
Yeah, well, I think they're two very different categories, right? You have, when you talk about middle of the field opener, two safety defenses, cover two is a totally different defense than quarters when you're talking about what you're asking specifically. Quarters, goes all the way back. People have been running it for a long time now, but it's a way to present a two safety defense, and in a lot of ways play a 9-man box in terms of run support, because you're getting both of those safeties involved in the run game, which can create challenges for the offense, right? But it also can create some opportunities, because when you have safeties that are so involved in the run game, then that can create opportunities to get the ball thrown over their head. If it's cover two and you have two defenders designed to play deep halves, and depending on whether you're playing some variation of Tampa 2 where the Mike linebackers run in the middle of the field, in a lot of ways that's like three deep with double cloud corners, on the outside. So I think they're two very different discussions and talking points. I think cover two is called to stop the pass and stop explosive plays in the pass. Quarters is really trying to present middle of field open, but be able to, in a lot of ways, end up with a 9-man box and two heavy run support safeties. Typically, you're going to see more explosive plays versus a quarters defense, because of the things we just discussed compared to a cover 2 defense. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that, of exposing and attacking quarters defenses in terms of creating explosive plays. There's obviously ways to do that against cover 2 as well, but it typically takes a little bit longer to be able to threaten those safeties, high-low the corners, whatever it may be, or put those 2 safeties in a bind with some variation of 3 verticals, sideline, and attacking the middle of the field. So I think overall we've done a nice job of that. I also think the fact that we've been able to run the ball more efficiently and more explosive helps us with the cover 2. Last year that could be challenging, where people could line up in cover 2, stop the explosive plays, and be able to do some things where they are pinching or gaming the front to take away your run game, and now the ball has to bounce on the perimeter, and now people are playing trap cover 2, which is another variation, kind of like quarters, where instead of using the safeties for run support, you're using the corners and using some type of defensive front or game or pinch to try to get the ball to bounce to the trap corners, or depending on how you want to term, trap cover 2 or run support number 2, cover 2, however you want to describe it, whatever your terminology may be.
In the front, Mike.
Hi, James.
Hey, Mike.
Kent State, they're 1-14 in their last 15 games. I don't know if you noticed, but they lost 71-0. And I know Paul was happy with the St. Francis win they had over Kent State. Knowing all that, what's your message to your players and the fans as far as seeing this as a credible opponent? And is someone like Northern Illinois, is Kent State talent-wise, could they be a comp for Northern Illinois and what they did? So when you point to the underdog message, thanks.
So when you say Paul, who's Paul?
Paul. He used to work at St. Francis.
Oh.
With the football team.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know Paul's resume. Sorry, Paul. I apologize about that. I think that the first thing I would say is, when you schedule these opponents, typically 5 and 7 years out, you don't know what you're going to get. You schedule a MAC team, and some of the teams that you just mentioned have caused people fits, and then you can get to a year where someone's struggling. So that's unpredictable and challenging. I think for us, it's ultimately about, and this is the challenge, I think, in college football. You hear people talk about it all the time, but the challenge is really, it's ultimately about us and our focus on Penn State and us getting better and developing and playing up to our standard week in and week out, which is easier said than done. We see it every Saturday. That's why I always say winning is hard. There's a lot of teams across the country that are sad Saturday night, and you want to do everything you possibly can to make sure you're not one of them. And it doesn't always come from an opponent that the fans and the media and the locker room think it's going to come from. So having a mature football team and approaching it that way on a consistent basis is hard to do. You've heard people talk about it, describe it as rat poison, all types of different things. Ultimately, we're trying to get our staff and our players to approach every week with the same mentality, with the same preparation, with the same approach. And when you do that, you give yourself the best chance to be consistent, and you give yourself the best chance to get better. And that's really what our focus is.
We got time for 2 more in the back. Allie?
Hey, Allie.
Coach. 16 of the top 25 teams in the AP poll right now, I know it's early, but they're SEC and Big Ten teams. What can you say about conference realignment, how this has been going, the parity maybe in the SEC and the Big Ten right now, given that the majority of the conference is ranked in that top 25?
Yeah, I would say that everybody probably anticipated that, right? With the growth of the SEC and the growth of the Big Ten, and not just the growth in numbers, but the type of programs that were joining both conferences. I think everybody in the country was talking and expecting that the Big Ten and SEC would be in a position to be dominant. The challenge that you're going to have with that, which I think is what the commissioners were working on, is you're also going to get to the point where all of the games are going to be SEC versus SEC and Big Ten versus Big Ten. And where does that leave you? Because you're playing really good teams, week in and week out. And I think that's where a lot of the discussions, which I think upset a lot of people about the number of Big Ten and SEC teams getting into the playoffs. And I think that was the reason why our scheduling looks very different than most other conferences, for what you just mentioned, the number of ranked teams in this two conferences. And we're going to get to the point where we're just going to be playing each other. So probably what I expected and probably what everybody expected. I would also say that's kind of where we're at now. But I would also say if you look at preseason rankings and how many of those teams maybe have some losses earlier in the year than they expected, that kind of goes back to Mike's point. You better approach each team with the right mentality and not look ahead, and focus ultimately on yourself and getting better. But I would say to your question, I think at this point of the season, it's probably about what most people anticipated. We just want to make sure that later in the season, you could make an argument for some SEC and some Big Ten teams with multiple losses, maybe getting in the playoffs over some conferences with maybe single losses, just based on the strength of both conferences.
Last question in the back, Andrew.
Hey, Coach.
Andy.
After each of the first two games, you've pointed out how the other team game planned to get the ball out quickly and kind of game plan against the pass rush. I was curious if, I don't obviously know how you expected to be defended or be played against, but does that help steer how you now game plan moving forward, knowing that now 2-for-2 teams have specifically played against your pass rush? Does that kind of steer your game planning?
Yeah, but I think that's kind of always been the case. I mean, we've been as successful in sacking the quarterback and tackles for loss as, arguably any program in the country over the last 10 years. We're part of that argument. So I think that's always kind of the plan. Like what you want to try to do, right, is you want to say, okay, what is the strength of the defense we're playing this week, and how do we nullify that strength as much as possible? Quick game, screens, move the pocket, run the ball, keep the game close. Because the other thing that you can do to really throw a curveball to that game plan is get up by enough points early in the game that they need to get away from that game plan. So, creating 3 and outs and turnovers and scoring on early drives on offense and get them down by, 17, 21 points where they feel like they're going to have to throw the ball more to get back in the game, then that obviously leads to opportunities as well. And then obviously playing at home. Playing at home obviously is a positive for us at Penn State, like it is for a lot of programs across the country, but it's magnified for us. So now if you can, whatever their game plan is, if you can play with a lead and do it at home, where now they have to get away from what their original game plan is and throw the ball more than they like, then those things all kind of combined lead to production, in that stat of sacks and tackles for loss and things like that. So combination of those things. I also think it deals with a little bit of the opponents as well. If you look at West Virginia, I think they were one of the best teams in the country last year, and not giving up sacks in terms of stylistically how they play. So all those things factor in. But at the end of the day, we would like more production in that area, and I think it's going to come.
Thank you very much, Coach.
Thanks, guys.